Welcome to the Yo Brother podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, is my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing good, man. I am ready for this episode. It's been another week, I guess. Are we back? I think we're back on our week schedule now, pretty much.
We are. It seemed long. It seemed like a long time since I've talked to you.
Yeah, we pumped out a couple there almost back to back, and it kind of threw me off. But July 18th, 2020, and we're ready to do this thing again.
Yeah. For those of you who have seen seen us, our logo, which you must see, right?
Right.
To click on this, you must see it. That's actually us.
That's really us, folks.
I do have a neck. Just want everybody who's worried about that.
I know you're obsessed about that, but I think
I am.
It's not as bad as you think, and I think it just it lends. I don't know. It gives you character.
Those are bodies. They're obviously our heads, but did he put our heads on different bodies?
Those are not our bodies. No.
I kind of looked pretty good in that. I was
See,
saying, yeah, it looked pretty good.
Right. It's
except for the neck.
Except for the no neck situation. I love the impression of 3D from Back to the Future, by the way. It's just fantastic.
I am the new 3D.
And apparently I like to enjoy my popcorn one kernel at a time, grasped delicately in between my fingers. Like, I don't
see. That's what you're obsessed with.
I don't know. I am. It's a little bit. It's like
you're throwing one kernel at a time in your mouth.
Well, I'm wondering is it possible that I ingest them through my ear canal? Is that what's about to happen? I don't know. But I love. Now, here's something, because I'm looking at the logo right now as we're talking about this, and
right.
Truth be told, the original iteration of this had the shirts reversed. And I said, well, wait a second. I've got to be wearing the Star Wars shirt. That only makes sense.
And I should be in a Kubrick shirt.
Exactly. But as I look at that, I'm ashamed to say I've still to this day not seen A Clockwork Orange.
You've not seen A Clockwork Orange?
I've not. Isn't that terrible?
Classic. Oh, that's awful.
And it's Kubrick.
It's awful.
It's terrible.
It's Kubrick.
I've
seen everything Kubrick.
Well, I won't admit to the others of his that I've not seen. And we're going to do an episode on Kubrick down the road too. And so that'll be my chance to do some homework, because I'm way behind on, it's something I've said on more than one episode, but there's just so many films. There's so much to consume. It's almost overwhelming sometimes. Like just earlier, before we get ready to set up for the recording, for some unknown reason, the film Teachers popped into my head. Do you remember that movie with Nick Nolte? And I want to say Ralph Macchio maybe was in it. I can't remember the rest.
I don't remember that.
Look that up later on, and it'll probably come to mind. But it was an 80s movie, and again, Nick Nolte.
You haven't watched The Killing yet?
I haven't. No,
Kubrick.
It's on my watch list. It's literally added to my Prime Video watch list. I just haven't hit play on that yet. And I've consumed. I got to tell you, my digital movie collection is expanding leaps and bounds because of these Voodoo weekend deals, and now I'm going on to Apple TV, and they've got a lot of similar deals on there, whether it's $4.99 or $5 or $6.99 or whatever, and just some really decent titles. A lot of Hitchcock, and I saw The Third Man was on there, and I'm thinking about picking that up.
Oh, that's great.
Orson Welles.
That's Criterion stuff, and that's out of print.
It's only $5.
Wow, you should pick. You don't get the Criterion's out of print, meaning they don't make it anymore.
Right.
And sometimes they lose the license. They only have the license for so long. Like a lot of people who are in the Laserdisc world want these Laserdiscs that from way back when, and they're like, why don't we ever get this commentary he did on the DVD? And it's because of licensing agreements and stuff like that.
Mm.
But what's today's topic? We haven't even
Well,
said it yet.
this was all you, but and you know, when you brought this up as a topic to do, you remember I was like struggling with it, you know,
Right.
but and I think I'm on to you.
Probably.
I think I've figured out your game here, and you tell me if I'm right. But so the episode this week, we're talking about life-changing movies, right? A movie that has changed your life in some significant way. And
Yes.
I, I asked you a sort of a clarifying question, like, it like literally changed my life. And, you had to kind of, we had some back and forth about that because I was really struggling to come up with something. And then a light bulb went on and I'm like, it's so obvious and I got it.
There was one text message I sent that seemed to all of a sudden you were like, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I think that helped. Now let me ask you this. So, did you get this idea from another podcast?
No, but you know what's really odd? And I'm wondering if I saw this and it had an impact on me, but I didn't get it from anywhere else. But I just now, what I do is I have my iPhone next to me.
Yep.
So whatever movie I'm going to talk about,
Yep.
I bring up IMBD.
IMDb. Yeah, and I know what you're looking at.
And it said,
Their podcast.
oh, yeah, I didn't see their podcast, but I saw something that said movies that changed our lives or something like that.
Yeah, so this is a podcast that they just started not that long ago, like maybe in the last few weeks or so, called Movies That Changed My Life. And
See, I didn't see that till today, unless I saw it and it subconsciously got into my head.
that's that. Well,
I didn't see it till tonight.
I can tell you right now, and looking at it, actually they introduced the first episode was May 7th. So it's only been out for a few months, but it's some celebrity talking
Right,
about movies that changed their life.
right.
So I said, "Oh,
And,
geez, I wonder if
um,
this is where he got the idea."
I brought this topic up at least a couple weeks ago. So I know I didn't see it, or at least I'd swear to it that I didn't see it on their website, but you never know how stuff gets in there.
So of course, now I'm super curious to know what your
What I'm
choices
afraid
and
of
yeah,
is that you know my whole story because I've
no,
told this story
nope.
a few times.
I have no
So
idea. I have no idea where you. I think I'm gonna have a sense of the influence or the impact or whatever you want to call it, but no, I'm
right.
totally. I have no idea what's coming, and so,
Okay.
but
Okay.
I'm super interested to hear. So, do you want to kick it off since this was your idea?
Well, I think, I always seem to go first. So I was going to say, why don't you take us first?
You
And
want me to go? All right.
yeah, go ahead.
So a movie. So at first I was thinking of movies at first that had some significant impact on my life. And I'm like, well, okay, and it would go from everything to, Star Wars to some Pacino film to, you name it. And I thought, well, it resonated with me, but it didn't necessarily change my life. And I was trying to follow that direction pretty literally. So, but again, as I said, a light bulb just clicked like 2 nights ago.
Hmm.
And
Right.
as soon as I start talking about this, you're going now I wonder, do you think what I'm gonna say?
I don't. I have a feeling I know what the end game is, like the impact,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure.
All right.
But
Well,
I think I have an idea.
I'm hoping this will be news to you. And I wrestled with it because I wasn't sure if it qualified, but it does. It
Your
does.
movie isn't Deliverance, right?
No, but it is
Okay.
Ishtar. It is Ishtar. Cat's out of the bag.
I'll tell you what, I watched Wrong Turn. This is from our last week's podcast. Good Lord, don't watch that movie,
No,
folks.
watch that movie, folks. That's a classic.
I mean, you're talking about Deliverance. You compared it to Deliverance, which is an Academy Award-winning classic, to these freaks. I mean, my God.
It was the comparison I was making was just the inbred situation. It wasn't anything more than that,
Good Lord.
But anyways, okay, so here's my selection. Movie that changed my life. And it'll seem like I'm somewhat stepping outside the bounds here, but it completely and totally qualifies. Now, this brings us back to 1980. Okay. And
a year after my movie.
Okay. Very interesting. So, and I think I can probably guess what your movie is. But anyways, so my film, I was 8 years old at the time. Okay. So folks can do the math real quick.
You must have been young.
And this involves you. And there's, as soon as this came to me and I had this kind of epiphany, then just everything started to fall into place and it was kind of wild. But so I'm 8 years old. It's 1980 and we're at home in Massachusetts. And I'm retelling this story based on my best recollection. All right. And feel free to fill in any gaps as I go along. But
so I know the story.
You do know this story.
I was part of the story.
You were part of the story. So you had, and again, correct me and interject as you need, but you had rented a film from the local video store and you were watching this in what was then your room, which would later become one of my rooms in the house. And you called at least mom into the room to witness what it is you were playing. And then I either tagged along behind or you called me in there, or I don't know what the story there was, but I'll never forget. I can see the TV, I can see the room and the way it was set up, but the film that was playing at the time was a concert film. And the name of that film is No Nukes.
Yep.
And so here's one of the first really cosmic kind of crazy coincidences or whatever about this selection is that film was released July 18th, 1980. And today is what?
Wow.
July 18th, 2020. Is that
sometimes
is that wild?
The cosmic nature of it. That is pretty wild.
It's so, and I'll draw this out and kind of make the connection as to why it's life changing. But you were so to be more specific, what you were showing us was the performance by Bruce Springsteen on that concert. Now, the concerts took place in 1979 in September, and this was the Musicians United for Safe Energy. And there was a lot of activism at that time about nuclear energy, and the 3 Mile Island incident had just happened in Pennsylvania. And so this was a 5-night stand at Madison Square Garden. But the concert film was released later, as I said, July 18th, 1980. And so Bruce Springsteen's performance in that film is really, you can probably ask anybody that's familiar with that film, and that's what they're going to remember from that entire film was his performance. And part of the reason is...
And any fan... I didn't mean to talk over you, but any fan of Bruce Springsteen knows this performance.
Yeah, and
if they don't, I'd be stunned.
I'd be shocked. And it was, significant because it was the first live performance of his that was captured on film. There was no other releases at that point. So nobody, unless you'd gone and seen him in concert, you had no idea what he was like in live in concert. So I just remember as young as I was, just sort of jaw dropped, like, who is this guy? And if you go and watch on YouTube, you could look this up, his performances, especially his performance of the song Quarter to Three, is like otherworldly. He just was on some other planet. The energy level.
I thought you were going to say the river.
Well, that's part of the story, right? And
Yeah.
as two huge fans of his for so many years, one of the things I know that always impacted you from the beginning was the premiere of the song "The River," which
Right.
that was September 21st and 22nd were the dates that he performed in 1979. So September 21st, 79 was when he premiered that song, which of course was about his sister and her having a child at a young age with her husband, and who are still
And they
together
weren't
today,
married.
by the way. Yeah, and they're
Oh,
still
that's
together
great.
today. Yeah, but that would come later. That impact for me would come later, I think. But and of course, he was not touring at that point. He had finished the Darkness on the Edge of Town tour. I think it officially ended in January of 1980. It was like one show that bled into 1980, or I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
that was
Yeah, it was actually, I'm sorry, 1979, I think I'm thinking. Yeah,
yeah, that was
1979.
my first Bruce concert, and I
Right.
was the big fan. And you said I called in Mom. I thought I called you in, but I remember we have another brother who used to make fun of me for liking Bruce. He doesn't sing, he just mumbles, and used to make fun of me all the time. And then I think he caught the video when we were watching it, and next thing you know, he's like an uber fan.
Well, it definitely had a profound effect on me. And the reason this is significant is there's more than one thread related to film and movies and cinema. And so that's one of the things I wanted to, first kind of retell the story just to sort of set the scene. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a number of different impacts that I noted from just that one moment in 1980, and in seeing that it was only about a 15-minute clip, of
Yeah,
a few of the
it was
songs he was
short.
playing. It was short.
Yes,
It was
yes.
short. And I actually have both of those. He released, I think it was in 2018, he released his two performances through his website. So you can actually go to his website and purchase the Springsteen and E Street Band performances at No Nukes on his website. But anyways, Bruce's music has always been very thematic, and it's very cinematic in nature. He has a way of, sort of describing things and sort of painting this picture through music and words that it's like, not many artists we know of have that ability. And I know from being a fan all these years, a lot of that I think was because he was such a huge film fan, and a lot of his songs are actually inspired by different films. I have various bootleg performances of his where he sets a song up by referencing some film like Thunder Road with Robert Mitchum or Badlands with Martin Sheen and others.
Martin Sheen, yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
he tells stories during the Born in the USA tour about meeting Ron Kovic, who Vietnam veteran.
Born on the 4th of July.
Exactly. And then that later
Yeah.
became Born on the 4th of July. So there's a lot of, tie-ins to movies in his music. And I thought that was kind of a nice, thread there. But another thing is it gave me a level of social awareness that I didn't have before, particularly social justice and issues related to social justice. And, I went on many years later, and as an undergraduate student studied sociology, and I would attribute some of that to the influence that I got through Bruce's music at a young age. And
Right.
you know as well as any fan of his knows that he's not one to shy away from social causes, especially even today. he's very outspoken on those kinds of things. And another impact is the power of performance. I think a lot of us doing this and you being into acting and comedy and all of these things that have kind of a common theme of performance. I think there's something that I took away from, again, those 15 minutes in 1980 and seeing that clip sort of gave me those interests and things that, to this day are still
And
a
at
big
that
part of my
time,
life.
yeah, at that time in my life, I was actually a drummer, and I had a band, and we used to do, everything from, downtown clubs in Boston to weddings, a ton of weddings. So, I had a musical connection to it. But yeah, I mean, that particular performance is the best of Bruce, and to me, it's funny because, I should let you keep telling the story because I don't want to step on any, because I'm sure you're going to say a couple things and I don't want to step on them.
Well, it's funny. There's a review on IMDb, and this guy just railed against the film. And I will say there's some other amazing performances in the No Nukes concert film, in particularly a performance by James Taylor and Carly Simon, who, of course, they were a couple at that time, performing
Right.
the song Mockingbird, which I think is the opening song of the film, the opening
What
performance of the
didn't
film.
Jackson Brown get Bruce? They were friends. Didn't he
Yes,
convince Bruce to do this?
he did. He did.
I thought so.
In fact, in his intro to the song The Promised Land on night one of his performances, he specifically says that. He says it's his, passion and purpose and conviction that got me to come down here tonight. Because, he was on break. He had finished this long, almost 2-year long tour. They were in the studio working constantly around the clock to release what would later become in 1980 his film The River. But there's a guy on IMDb that one of the user reviews, there's only a few of them, but this guy just hated it. And in fact, the heading of the review just says terrible. But what
I see it, yeah.
But what I thought was funny is it says, so there's really only two things to watch this movie for: Springsteen's stellar performance and as a sad snapshot about a counterculture and decline. But, so even those that didn't like this film, that performance stood out. And the last
It's
thing
funny because the first heading that comes out is, the guy writes Bruce in all caps 3 times because
right.
we see in the film they shoot him in the band walking around the corner to go on stage, and you can hear, it sounds like the audience is booing, but they're all going Bruce, Bruce. I mean, it's just,
yeah,
it was maniacal back then.
There's a great scene, that same scene you're talking about, and Shaka Khan, I think, was either just performed or something, and then in the, thought she was being booed, and of course it was Bruce, and then they cut to Bonnie Raitt in the, backstage, and she says it's too bad his name wasn't Melvin.
Right, exactly. I remember that. Yeah. And I think somebody was like, who is this guy? This is really young. This is early in his career.
Well,
he was 29, I believe, right?
That's right, because the last, he only performed on the 21st and 22nd. They had another No Nukes concert on the 23rd of September, which of course is his birthday. So he turned 30
Say that
the day
again?
after. He turned 30 the day after his second performance on the 22nd of September. So his birthday is September 23rd, 1949.
Yeah, because the one they filmed, he goes through this thing and he's like, I can't go on. He's doing kind of a James Brown kind of thing. I'm almost 30 years old. I can't keep doing this. Yeah, it was really funny.
Go on like this. I'm 30 years old. My heart's starting to go on me. I
The only other thing I wanted to mention, and not to get too distracted on this, so we can roll over to hear what, because I want to hear what your film is, and I think I have an idea of that. But
Yeah.
Bruce's music, and again, all tying back to having been exposed to that brief segment of that film at the time, was a common theme in a lot of his music was, of course, as you know, the relationship with his father. And that was one other thing that, in seeing his performance on this film, and then ultimately being influenced and becoming a really big fan of his, it gave me a way to communicate with Dad. Dad was a huge Elvis fan, and Bruce was a huge Elvis fan, and it opened the door to the conversation between fathers and sons. And we've talked about it briefly in, I think, one of our other episodes, but that when we were reviewing the movie Onward, and that's a very unique relationship. And
Right.
I think through Bruce's music and hearing how he related to his father, in some ways helped me relate to Dad in some ways, particularly through music. So I'm forever grateful for that. And I just wanted to show you this. I'm going to hold this up, and maybe I can send this out on social media. But a couple of his performances on this film, you can find them on this VHS tape.
Yes.
Which is his anthology.
It's now on I think I have that on DVD too, right?
There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Right.
There it is. Well, what it was the VHS, which I'm holding up right now, was 1978 to 1988, and then they expanded upon it with the DVD release, which is 1978 to 2000. So they're overdue for another, they're overdue to upgrade this onto 4K.
Yeah, I would say.
But, if you look on the back, of course, you'll see the credits there for the performances that were part of No Nuke stuff. The River, of course, Thunder Road.
Now, I took you to your first concert, right?
You did, and that would be another 5 years later in August of
Was
85.
it that long? I thought it was like, okay, I thought it was like the next year.
No, but my earliest memory, though, is I can remember us driving in your Blazer somewhere, yes. I don't know where, and I can remember hearing Hungry Heart. That was also an early memory for me, off the River album. And so, again, from that same time, circa 1980. But no, we ended up, my first ever concert experience of Bruce in person was August 31st, 1985. And I've seen him now 60 times since then.
You actually keep track, huh?
Yeah, as many of us crazy hardcore fans do. And,
the only thing...
If there's
only thing I remember is how much I paid for the tickets.
I know. That was a wild experience. We could do a whole episode on that, although it's not movie related. I know. But we'll kick off a music podcast someday. But yeah, and you almost murdering me because I locked the tickets. I locked the tickets in the car.
Yeah, we were just getting ready to get our stuff and go into the concert.
Yep.
And was this this was the big show, right? Because we were in the fifth row.
Yeah, so we were supposed to see him on the 30th and 31st, but when as you remember, there was and this is very rare. This has not happened many times at all with him, but there was a pretty bad storm moving in, and so he actually postponed the show.
That's right. Sunday. We were getting ready to go in.
That's right. So we ended up having to stay over in New Jersey, and we saw him on the 31st. Just, we bought a couple of pairs of tickets. Well, you did, from a scalper. We don't endorse that, of course, ladies and gentlemen. And then the show of all shows was Sunday, September 1st, 1985. One of his longest shows on record.
Yeah, that stood as the longest show for a long time.
Yeah, it was well over 4 hours, I think.
And it was in the middle of the summer, and he brought out, the end of the summer, sort of, and he brought out this big, because if you saw him around Christmas time, he used to do Santa Claus is Coming to Town, which he eventually released.
Right.
And, he said, if you were here Friday night, you wouldn't have got this. This is a bonus. And he brought out the Santa Claus and they sang Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
In the bootleg world, that was referred to as the Sunday night special, because that's what he called it that night when he was setting that up. He referred to it as the Sunday night special,
right?
And gave us a little bit extra because of the fact that we had to wait. But so, anyways, No Nukes, 1980 concert film. If you haven't seen it, look, I can't say that I'm highly recommending it for anything other than Bruce Springsteen's performance, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band's performance in this film, because for all the reasons I mentioned, it truly has changed my life in so many ways. And I have you to thank for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought we mentioned this on another podcast when we were talking about physical media or renting, but we rented that Betamax tape probably 50 times, from the store. Every weekend I would go down, would drive around the corner, watch that like 10 times and then bring it back.
All right. So I have to, in full disclosure, say what just happened. So as we were talking, I'm hearing this rumbling. And I don't know if it's fireworks still, some of these people that are still like think it's July 4th, and then I'm like, is it firecrackers or someone shooting off a gun? Like, I don't know what's going on. And then I'm like, I detect where it's coming from, and I realize it's on the roof of my house. So I run outside, because I started to move to different locations in the upper part of my house, and I realized, it's coming from this one section. So I go outside, or I look out back, and we have these like turkey buzzards, they call them in Florida. They're like these huge buzzards. And
I don't remember these things. You brought this up.
They're crazy creepy. So I go out there, and they're up on my roof. And these things are like, you remember the monkeys from Wizard of Oz? And they would like, remember
the flying monkeys?
They're huge, yeah. And so these things could like pick you up and take you away. But so long story short,
they're the size of monkeys.
They're bigger than monkeys. They're big. These things are.
Me.
Oh, the wingspan is
never
crazy.
Seen them?
I don't know. It's interesting when you go out to Disney now, it's particularly Animal Kingdom, obviously. Well, I think I'm only thinking specifically of Animal Kingdom. There's a couple of spots on one of the safari tours where they're sitting lined up against each other on a guardrail as you turn the corner to where like the alligators are down below. And they just sit there like looking at you, like, what are you looking at? Like they're so huge and menacing. And so I realized they're like turkey buzzards, I think is what they call them. And there's at least 24 out there right now. And they've got a carcass is what it is. And so they're all clamoring for this carcass, but they're using my roof as like to station the troops, to strategize.
So they grab some of the carcass and then they munch it on your roof?
Yeah, I think that's what's happening. And here I'm in my slippers and shorts and whatever, and I go out there and I'm clapping and I'm trying to, and they're moving away, but then I see they're dragging this whatever it used to be, unfortunately, and I'm trying to get them to kind of go further down the road. So hopefully you don't.
What do you think it was? Like that
I'd rather not say. I think it was a domesticated animal.
Oh no!
Yeah. Let's just say it was a mongoose or something like that.
Man.
We'll just say it was like a kangaroo, like got loose down in South Florida the other day. Listen, only in Florida. Only in Florida does this shit happen. But
I'm not going to sleep.
Yeah, it's really creepy. It's really creepy. So I just needed to, and if you hear me distracted or if I need to hit pause on this episode, we might need to do that because the turkey buzzards are coming to get me. Now, it might have just been they were saying, okay, how long is this story you got? Can we move on to Mike? That's really what we want to hear. So, so with that, nothing like a good turkey buzzard segue. Let's. I want to sit back now and enjoy your story here. So, Mike's film that's changed his life.
Yes, and I'm wondering if you've heard this story before, because I know I've told it, and it took place over several years. But I think you've heard me mention that I went to law school.
Yeah.
And the movie that I'm talking about is from 1979. Dan, do you know it?
Can I take a guess?
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you this one question: does it star Al Pacino?
Yes.
Okay, I'll let you reveal it because it's your movie.
Okay. The movie's called Injustice for All with Al
such
Pacino.
Such a great film.
Great movie, and it's my first year in high school, and here in Massachusetts, high school is 10th grade, 10th, 11th, 12th. So I'm in my first year of high school, 15. And, the only thing to do in the winter here is go to the movies or go out to eat. Like if you ever go on a date, you either go to the movies or go out to eat. It's like there's nothing else to do, unless, as you get older and can go into adult places or whatever. Like
video stores, you mean?
Yeah, video stores. But
you flung open those wooden saloon doors more than
I
once.
opened that up to me for myself. But so it's got Al Pacino in it, who if not my favorite actor, definitely right up there, top 3 maybe. And this movie, he plays a very idealistic lawyer. And there's several stories in the movie. I won't go too much into the movie other than to say he was a defense attorney. And he was really good at it. And like I said, he believed in the law, and it really had an impact on me. I can remember sitting there saying, I'd love to do that. The problem was I absolutely hated school. I mean, I hated school. I think I set the record for most days absent in high school. I'm not even kidding about that.
I
got called. No, I definitely know it was me. But I got called into we had a housemaster each year. When you're in 10th grade, it's one guy, and then it's a woman, and then another guy. But anyway, I got called in a few times, and I'm surprised they let me graduate because, I had missed so many days. And a lot of those I was faking sick, putting the thermometer against the light.
Like the old Norton.
Yeah, Norton. Exactly. 111. That's a little side thing for us. But anyway, so I'm thinking, and I remember my best friend, Dave, and I remember when we were graduating, he was going to college I graduated in 1981. And back then, around that time, it was about a 50-50 split. Either you were going to college or you had a job and you were going to go work.
Especially up there.
Yeah, you didn't have to go to college. You could, work your way into a decent career without having a college degree. Today, it's almost like, a 4-year degree has almost become like a high school degree. Mm-hmm. You almost have to have it. So I remember, I was working as a drummer. I was making a pretty good living right out of high school. If you remember, I grew a beard to look older because I was only 17 and I had to get into nightclubs. and I was, you're supposed to be 21 back then. So
That was inspired by the 73 Pacino film Serpico, but anyways.
Yeah, that's right. And luckily I was one of those kids that could grow a beard, in high school. So, um, and there was a couple of times, a couple of clubs that they wanted to see my ID. And, I acted like, oh, I've got my suit on for the show, because we used to wear like tuxes.
Right.
And I said, I don't have my license, because I'm in my work clothes or whatever. And they would just look at me, and I think when I was 17, I could pass for, 21. And then when I was 21, I couldn't pass for, 16. So anyway, I remember saying to Dave, who went off to college, and I was playing the drums, and, I had all sorts of money. I had a brand new car. I had all sorts of stuff. That Springsteen concert, those tickets were $400 a pop. But, to me, I always had cash, because what it was is I worked during the day in a music store. I was teaching virtually every night of the week at a different high school. And then I taught at a studio some days. I would teach, students how to play the drum set. And, then on the weekend, I was in a nightclub, or sometimes we'd do 3 weddings in a weekend.
Wasn't one of your drum instructors, didn't he also teach Steve Smith at some point, the drummer of Journey?
Yeah, Dave Vos, who was one of my drum instructors, who had a big influence on me as a drummer. Yeah, taught Steve Smith, who was the drummer for Journey, at the height of their.
I always thought that was cool.
Yeah, the height of their popularity. And so anyways, I had said to Dave a couple of times, if I could only, do the schooling, I'd love to be a lawyer. And, I just knew it wasn't going to happen. I hated high school. My grades, except for math, I was always a great math student. I always found that as like a game. So I always got A's in math without even opening the book. And then, sure enough, we were living in Florida, and I was working, I won't even say what I was doing, but I was working at a job I hated. Just one of those jobs that was just, brutal to go in every day. And I finally got to the point where I was like, I've got to make a life-changing move here. So, I'm thinking, what do I want to do? I got to go back to school, because the profession I was in, that was it. I could go and be that somewhere else. Otherwise, I had to get totally re-educated for another career, because now we passed the point of, hey, you can just work your way up into a big position. Now you got to have college. And I was told that when I was brought in for my review.
Yeah.
And this is what ticked me off, is the manager, my manager, brought me in and wrote the review, and I could see there was 5 levels, like perfect, above average, average, so forth. And nobody ever got perfect, because they had to give you a big raise if you got that.
Of course.
She had erased above average and put me in average. And I was bullshit. I was so mad that as soon as I looked down, she was trying to go through the review, like you do. And Dan knows this because he works in human resources, and I worked in human resources too. But I couldn't get off of that. I could not get off of that. She was like, well, this Mike, you do great. I said, wait a second. No, I am not average. I said, who's average? Dave downstairs. He's average. You know who's average? And I went through all this. I was just bullshit about being called average.
You're average. I'm average. This whole thing's out of average.
Yeah. So I said, you didn't, why did you erase it? And I knew the answer. It was the district manager, who happened to be in our place, made her change it. I said, I want to talk to him. I don't want to talk to you, because you know who's average? You're average. And I said that right to her. I was done.
I object.
Yeah, I knew I was quitting at this point. So I went into him and I laid into him, and he said, you know, Mike, I don't know why you're so mad. I mean, you don't have any college. And my head almost exploded, because the job I was doing had nothing to do with college. And I was the top performer in this place, and I was just so ticked off. So I quit right there on the spot, quit. And sure enough, I went and I got another job in a similar place, bigger salary. You know, that held me for about 9 months. And then I started itching again. And I said, you know, I've just got to bite the bullet. The problem was I bought a house. So all of a sudden you got a mortgage you got to worry about.
Yeah, but listen, I mean, you go from a KB Toys salary to Toys R Us. I mean, that's a pretty significant jump.
That's pretty close, you know. I think that would have been an upgrade.
You know what's funny is I actually worked at Toys R Us. That was one of my first jobs, and I was going through some of my old memorabilia the other day.
Yeah.
This is how insane I am. I still have, of course, I'm admitting now to theft, but which is something unique from my background. But I actually have my orange Joffrey vest with my name tag from.
Oh, that's yeah. You lasted what, 2 weeks?
Listen, this was the story very quickly. It was cleanup on aisle 5, and I quit, and I never returned. Some kid urinated or shit himself on aisle 5 or whatever, and the manager said, "Yeah, Smith, I need you to blah blah." I'm like, "I'm not cleaning that up," and I left, and I never came back. And that was the end of that. I'll have to send that out on social media at some point. That's
funny. That's funny.
I think you dropped me off for that interview too, actually.
I think I did. But okay, so I finally, I almost
bring
had a
this
break.
back to Injustice for All. Come on.
I know. So anyway, I finally, I have almost a breakdown. Literally, I'm like, I came home from work one night. I'm just sitting there in my suit, and I'm so miserable. And finally, I said, you know what? I'm gonna just find a way to survive. So I quit, and I enroll in community college. And I went there for 1 year and transferred. And the whole time I'm thinking in the back of my head about Al Pacino, and I can see myself in the courtroom making those arguments like him, you know, and saying, you know, Your Honor, this is wrong. This is not right. I could see myself, you know, in the courtroom convincing the jurors. Let me cut to the chase. I went to law school, right? And I won't tell the story of how I got there, but I had to move. I had 2 schools in mind, one in Florida and one out in California, in Southern California, San Diego. And those were the only 2. It's very expensive to apply for law school. So I picked 2. It was, you know, I wanted to stay in Florida, but I got waitlisted. So in the meantime, the other school accepted me, and it was around Thanksgiving, and school started right after Christmas, like the 26th, literally. So I had to make a decision, and I actually had to take a train for 2 reasons. A, it was too expensive to fly, and I couldn't afford it. Second reason was you could take a lot of stuff. You could take a bunch of boxes, and I was able to pack a bicycle. So when I got to San Diego, I could travel around on my bicycle. Never Rains in Southern California, right?
Planes, Trains, and Bicycles, another great film.
Yeah, I'm all set. So anyway, I get there. I hated it. Law school, first year of law school was brutal. It was worse than the job I think I had. And every day I was thinking about quitting. Every day I would go to law school and I would think, today I'm going to quit. And I never missed a class. I come home from law school. Again, this is first year. I think it's broken up. Your first year is broken up into 2 semesters, and second year, 2 semesters, so on and so forth. So it was the second semester of my first year. And what happened was, when I first got there to San Diego, my first month in law school, it rained every single day. And I was living in a temporary, really scummy hotel that was like, it was whacked. People, I mean, there was drug stuff going on. And I can remember I would not walk on the rug because it was so disgusting. I had to have shoes on.
Yeah, but that was a great place to recruit clients.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking that way at the time. I was thinking like, I'm going to be a client because I'm going to kill somebody. So I finally, I settled down and I come home one night and I'm sitting there on the sofa and it was on TBS, the movie station or something like that. Aren't they called the Superstation? So I'm watching TBS and what comes on, Dan?
And Justice for All.
Justice for All comes on, and there's Al Pacino and blah, blah, and he's, making that argument. And I'm like, oh my God, I hadn't thought of this since I started law school about Injustice for All. I thought about it until I got to law school, but all I was thinking about in law school is how much I hated it. I wasn't thinking, oh yeah, Al Pacino, I'm going to be in the courtroom and this. So here I am watching Injustice for All, and all of a sudden a light bulb goes off. It wasn't the law that I loved. It wasn't his arguments. I loved Al Pacino's acting.
Yep.
And the whole thing went off. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be a lawyer. I want to be an actor. That's what I've wanted to be since I was 11. And I kind of knew it because we used to make movies all the time.
The power of performance. I mentioned it earlier.
It's so weird. Al Pacino was so good in that. And
it's a great cast, actually.
Oh man, his grandfather is played by the king of all actors, Lee Strasberg,
who shared screen time in The Godfather with him.
Absolutely, Hyman Roth.
Godfather 2, that is.
Yeah, and people who studied acting seriously had Strasberg as a coach.
Can we give it up for Hank Kingsley, though?
Oh yeah, hey now. He's another great actor.
That's one of the first things I think I can remember seeing him in. Jeffrey Tambor was in Justice for All. Yeah, as well as some people probably don't know, he was in. He made a reoccurring appearances on the sitcom Three's Company.
Exactly, he was in a lot of sitcoms.
He was in a lot of sitcoms back then.
A lot of sitcoms. So anyway, so there it is. There's the big reveal. And there's no way I'm quitting law school after all I went through to get there. And I think everybody in the first year hates it and wants to quit. By the time I got to the third year and I was actually doing mock cases, which I never lost one, proud of that. I enjoyed the heck out of it. The second and third year I had fun. But I still knew deep down that, I was working at a law firm in my third year. So I actually started to work for this guy, and he really liked me, and he wanted me to actually take over his firm. He was getting ready to retire, and I was like, "You kidding me? You've got 7 lawyers with seniority, and you're gonna." I'm still a third year student, and he was talking to me about, no, I think you could, take over. And I said, no, I don't think so. And sure enough, I was lucky enough to have friends in San Diego to turn me on to teaching. And I got my first teaching gig while I was still working at the law firm, teaching public speaking, which kind of made sense because as a lawyer, you've got to persuade people, and speech, you got to do a persuasive speech is kind of the big speech. So I loved teaching because it was kind of a form of acting.
Right.
It really was. Although, it was just something I was made for. I never thought I would be a teacher. Never once, saw a movie and said, yeah, I want to do that. I want to hand out crayons. I taught college. I never taught kids, but so that became my career. And on the side, I was doing plays every, you do a play, it was like a 6-week engagement. So I had to commit 6 weeks of my nights to, rehearsals. So I'd be teaching all day and then rehearsals at night. And that's kind of the story.
Well, it's interesting how I'm sitting here thinking how different our film choices are, first of all. So you've got Injustice for All. I have a concert film, No News.
Right.
But I'm struck by some of the commonalities, which, the social justice, right? Which is a common theme
Right.
for both stories. Also, it
Okay.
leads us both into careers in higher education.
Right.
Another thing too, I'm thinking of Pacino. I always thought if you go and you Google Al Pacino circa Serpico, like that period of time, and you then put beside that Bruce Springsteen from about 1973 to 1975,
People made that.
they're like
Yep.
doppelgangers.
People made that comparison about Bruce all the time. Like if he wanted to be an actor, he could have been like an Al Pacino.
Yeah, and again, and the theme of performance too. So it's pretty wild how, like, because when we do episodes like this in particular, we don't talk about this in advance. We don't swap notes. We don't, it's kind of we come in cold, and so I'm finding it kind of wild how, given that, how similar they are. It's pretty neat.
And both roads led to, like you say, us working in higher education.
Yeah,
which is pretty odd. I don't think
and we've both taught, we've both performed, we've both, it's
all the things we liked, all the things that kind of motivated us, we kind of lived out in a different way than we expected. I thought I was going to be in front of juries. I thought right now I'd be in front of a jury.
Yeah, so don't underestimate the power of film, folks. I mean, I think, it's one of those things, right? This is just 2 examples of the power that these 2 films had on our lives. And
love to hear stories of people out there that
what's your story? What's your life-changing movie?
Yeah, and what I had said to you when we were texting and you were kind of like, I'm not sure. I was like, think of something that had an impact on you.
Yeah. What were you thinking of?
Me?
Yeah.
I was thinking of music. I was thinking of, ironically, I wasn't thinking like concert film, but I was thinking that you would see some connection between a movie. Concert film would have been too easy, but you would have seen a connection between that and kind of you playing guitar. Dan plays guitar. self-taught, pretty good.
Well, the interesting thing too is, I mean, that was such an influence. I actually
Yeah.
have Bruce tattooed on my arm, but yeah, well, it's funny because that was one of the initial thoughts was music and movies, because I have always found, great influence and power in music and film. So, they're very sort of interrelated. And,
Yeah.
these are just a couple of examples again of the power of film. I
And
mean,
again, this is a really odd episode because we kind of, we didn't really talk about the movie. We talked mostly, personal things for both of us. But I do want to really point out how good a movie this is. Still, it holds up. And I hope Dan puts a clip on social media from IMDb. If you play the trailer,
IMDb.
Dan,
It's just
IMDb. IMDb.
Yeah.
What do I
IMDb.
say? I kept saying
IMBD. Yeah.
I got them reversed. Yeah. So if there's a long trailer, like a 2.5 minute trailer, and I watched it before we started.
Right.
And I was like, wow. When I was watching that, it was like, talking to me.
Well, it's been another eye-opening episode. I always kind of, I always enjoy sort of hearing what's coming, and I never quite really know. In fact, I did think it was going to be Pacino related, but I thought it might have been more on The Godfather and an acting trip, which there was a thread of that in there, but you went the other way with it. So I thought that was interesting.
Right. And even for me, it was such a trip when in first year of law school, I sit down to watch a movie and there's Al Pacino, and I'm like, and the whole thing just played through my head, like how I got there.
Yeah.
And it kind of lifted a big weight off me, because a lot of people don't know this, but in the middle of your first year, when you get your first grades, after you get your first set of grades, most law schools flunk out 15% of their class. 35% of my class was failed out. So when you come back the next day after grades come out, all these empty seats, it's really like, here I am, I'm like complaining about it. And all these people who paid all this money, they don't give you a refund if you flunk out. They were all like, going to be lawyers and really into it. And, they're gone, and I'm still standing.
Yeah, I got to get these turkey buzzards off my roof. They are just like,
wow.
They're doing like, some Bob Fosse number on my rooftop here. I got to figure out what's going on before the sun goes down and, they carry me off down the street. But I got to wrap because these things are like, I got to figure out what damage they're doing. I walked out and there was a huge, I'm not kidding. There was like a 2-foot long feather on my walkway. So I gotta go out there with some sort of assault rifle and get them out of here.
Like, you gotta take a picture of these things.
I will. It's crazy. It's crazy because they're not very, they're not very easily scared away. But you can we're everywhere. You get us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We got a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to, and if we'd love to have you subscribe to that channel, and also hit the thumbs up button on that channel, and also hit the notification bell so you're notified every time we push out new episodes. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, we're going to start pushing out video content from our podcast episodes as well. And there's other ways you can reach us. You can email us at obpodcast@gmail.com, OHB as in brother podcast@gmail.com. We've got a listener line too. Call us, for crying out loud. We don't have a lot going on these quarantine days, so we'd love to hear from you. You can call us 407-476-8781. Leave us a voicemail. We may even feature it on a future episode, but just drop us a line and let us know what you like about the episodes, and your thoughts about the films that we're talking about, or maybe ones that we haven't gotten to yet you'd like us to talk about, whatever it is, we just want to hear from you. So make sure that you follow us, subscribe, like, drop us some comments. Well, for now, I've been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, is my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.